Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2023. This is David Cowburn, Service Delivery Manager here at Lawmaster, and today we'll be speaking about Lawmaster's Cuba R2 release. The primary focus of the Cuba R2 release has really been to provide our clients with the required toolkit so that they can commence their run to compliance in line with ATO's STP 2020. So basically today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a quick introduction and housekeeping. We're having a bit of a chat about upgrade considerations, the supported platforms, the STP Phase 2 overview and the system changes in that space, the process for switching to STP Phase 2, and then we'll go through a quick summary and wrap up. So today with me, I've got Christina Fenwick, our product manager. She's been with Lawmaster for about 20 years now. And we also have Leanne Smith. Next slide, please. Leanne Smith, our financial accountant, who, like most of us, has also been around for quite some time, has also been back at Lawmaster for about 3 years now. So a little bit of, from a housekeeping perspective, we'll book 30 minutes in for today. So we'll be running through for about 10 minutes on the development changes themselves. The following 20 minutes, we'll be having a look at the overview of the switching process as well. Just to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. And for all those participants today, a copy of that recording will be made available to you, and also for those people who didn't or weren't able to attend today. That recording will also be accessible on our knowledge base. So if you don't know how to access our knowledge base, please get in touch with myself. So without further ado, I hand you over to Christina, who will run you through the first section of the webinar.
Thank you, David. I think you can hear me okay. So what I'd like to do, so Cuba R2 was all about STP Phase 2 and getting that in. Now, a couple of things regarding the release. The release notes are available from the knowledge base, and this can be accessed from within Lawmaster by going to menu bar, help, and then the knowledge base on the new toolbar, or menu bar, help, Lawmaster release notes. Okay, as well as the release notes being available, we have also created a quick reference guide, which gives us a brief summary of all of the changes together with any pre and post upgrade tasks that need to be attended to, as well as the STP user guide, which has been put together to help with the switching process. We also have the usual minimum hardware and software requirements, which and the webinar recording will also be available from our knowledge base following the completion of this session. Okay, so the information on the supported platforms is included in both the release notes and the minimum hardware and software requirements document. In Cuba R2, we have maintained support for the same Windows Server and SQL Server versions as Cuba. The Windows 10, 11 and Office versions have been updated. The main thing to remember with both of those products is that the Windows and Office updates need to be on the semi-annual channel. It's important to get IT to double check these before you go ahead with the upgrade, as there have been instances where Microsoft has changed these on users to the current channel. Okay, so let's get into the changes that we've made. So conceptually, STP Phase 1 was very similar to the existing PAYG payment summary reporting process. The post-salary sacrifice totals of year-to-date gross income was reported with most payments other than allowances, lump sums and ATPs combined and reported as gross. Phase 2 moves to a model of reporting pre-salary sacrifice disaggregated gross income. So the splitting out of the various payroll components so they can be reported separately. The reason for doing this is that STP is moving to become a tool to streamline business interaction with government as a whole, not just the ATO. Services Australia, in particular, will use this disaggregated information from the STP Phase 2 reports. Income will be separated into the categories of gross, which is the residual amount that remains, reportable income less your separately itemised components, including payments for ordinary hours and shift penalties. Then we have overtime, which includes payments that do not relate to ordinary hours worked. We need to separate up bonuses and commissions. So these are payments recognising the employee for something, such as your Christmas or your performance bonuses. We have paid leave, and as the name suggests, this relates to any payment for leave. There are actually a lot of subcategories, but you will find that the usual leave payments, such as annual and personal leave, will fall under the category of other leave. The new family and domestic violence leave has some special rules, and there'll be a knowledge base article prepared to step you through how to set this up within Lawmaster. With the allowances, there are a number of new subcategories to better associate the payments and bring them into line with the tax return options. The salary sacrifice types are also reported for both super and other employee benefits. And lump sum payments, whilst we've always separated out lump sum payments, we do have some new requirements. So the lump sum E year for which the payment is associated is now recorded in Lawmaster at the time of making the payment. And that's reported to the ATO in the STP report, therefore making that letter to the employee with this information redundant. We also have a new lump sum W, which reports payments covered by the tax table for return to work payments. The employment termination payments, or ETPs, there's not been many changes in here, but they are still separately reported as they were previously. Leanne will demonstrate in the next session of the slides how to categorise your payroll payment and deductions for STP Phase 2. One of the benefits of STP Phase 2 reporting is that tax file number declarations are no longer need to be sent separately to the ATO. As a result, we've had to record some additional information against the employees to support this. One of those fields is the employment basis code, and it details whether the employee is either full-time, part-time, casual, non-employee, which is used for voluntary reporting of super liabilities for contractors. If that option is selected, then no earnings history is allowed, and that code is actually created on upgrade. We also have the option of the employment basis code of death beneficiary, which is a recipient of an ETP death beneficiary payment. If you need to set up an employee that is a death beneficiary, please contact Lawmaster and we'll work you through the process of setting that up. On upgrade to Cuba R2, all the payroll classification codes that start with an F, a P or a C, they will be allocated to an employment basis code of full-time, part-time or casual. Where there may be some instances where we can't associate the classification code with the appropriate employment basis code, particularly if the classification code starts with a T. In that case, they'll just be left blank. And we have some validation warnings in place on the employee record that will be displayed to the user, such as what we have in the screenshot here, where the classification hasn't been recorded against the employee. Okay, so the employment details, including the tax-free threshold status and the study loan information, which was previously supplied in the tax file number declaration, will form the basis of a new reporting field called the tax treatment code. This advises the ATO of the employee's circumstances as advised by the employee to the employer in that tax file number declaration. The tax treatment code is compiled from the information which is provided in the pay details tab and or the employment basis code if it's a non-employee or a death beneficiary. The code that's displayed in the STP reconciliation report when the payroll event 2020 STP service is selected, you can see in the slide in front of you there the tax treatment code column on the right-hand side in the reconciliation report. Okay, if you see that being ever reported as 6 X's, then there is an issue with your pay details that you've nominated, and you need to go back to the pay details tab in the employee and adjust the tax scale accordingly or the Medicare code accordingly. Okay, the cessation type is also now mandatory when reporting the cessation date under STP Phase 2. Services Australia will use that cessation type reported to minimise the need for payers to provide an employment separation certificate. To assist with reporting this information, we have allowed users to add the cessation date and cessation type and then run the final pay for the employees. So you can still continue to add a pay if for that final pay after recording the cessation date and cessation type. Another big change we've made is the STP reconciliation report, which has been enhanced to report both payroll event 2018 and payroll event 2020, which is the STP Phase 2 service. The default selection will be based on the current service within your parameters. So until you switch over, it will just default to payroll event 2018. Leanne will step you through the process of categorising the payroll payment and deduction codes within the new STP Phase 2 fields to ensure the data is displayed and reported for STP Phase 2 correctly. Where subcategories are required, example, leave, allowances, lump sums, salary sacrifice and deductions, additional subtabs have been provided to display the amounts allocated to each subcategory. Leanne will now go through the steps to switch over to the new payroll service.
Thanks, Christina. So as Christina's mentioned, the user guide is now available from the knowledge base. The user guide is quite detailed and is there to assist you with the transition from STP Phase 1, Payroll Event 2018, to STP Phase 2, Payroll Event 2020. Do not be overwhelmed with the length of the guide or what is required. The user guide is it's there to assist you. The user guide is broken down into different sections, being the key changes to STP Phase 2, the changes to parameters, including what Christina has already mentioned, changes to some of the forms, the transition to STP Phase 2, and we have some appendixes there for you as well. I'm now going to review some of the key steps that you need to complete for the transition to STP Phase 2. Thanks, Christina. There are 12 steps to complete the transition to STP Phase 2, with the last step being processing your pays. So these steps need to be done for all companies where you process the pays within Lawmaster. So if you have 2 companies for payroll, then steps 1 to 7 need to be done for both companies prior to step 8, where you switch the payroll service over. These steps also include running various reports and conducting balance checks. They don't need to be done straight away once you've upgraded to Cuba R2. However, you must be switched over to STP Phase 2 and have processed an update event to the ATO by the 30th of April. If you're unable to have this done by the 30th of April, you'll need to seek your own deferral, and these details are also located on our knowledge base. The first step for your transition is to run a health check over your employee data, your payroll payment, and payroll deduction codes. The STP2 health check is a new menu item available from Payroll and Personnel, Single Touch Payroll, STP2 health check. So if you don't have access to this menu, you'll need to ask your system administrator to arrange this from security settings. The STP2 health check will display 3 tabs: employees, payments, and deductions. In this screen, you can also change the view to have multiple rows or multiple columns. Each tab has 3 warnings: green for no validation errors or warnings, Amber, there are validation warnings to be attended to, or it needs to be set to reviewed. And red, there are validation errors to be corrected. All records will need to be set to green prior to switching to STP Service Payroll Event 2020. The first tab on the STP Health Check is Employees. These checks can be done over several days, and you'll need to review each employee record to ensure the correct data, such as the first name, surname, which are the legal names, addresses, phone numbers, hire date, date of birth, tax file number. You also need to check the employment basis code, as mentioned earlier, and update any cessation reason if you have a terminated employee throughout the year. Where you have made any lump sum e-payments, you'll need to contact Lawmaster through our help desk to update the associated year the lump sum e-payment was applicable. If you have a non-employee for superannuation purposes, you'll need to associate their Lawmaster entity in the contractor ID field, ensuring that the ABN is completed on the entity record, which you can see from the financial tab. No employment history can be recorded against a non-employee, so you may need to add a new record and enter any superannuation journals after reversing from their old record. During your checks, even if all employee records are green, it is recommended to review the data on the STP2 Health Check. The second tab on the STP2 Health Check is the Payments tab. These refer to the payroll payment parameters for any allowances or payments made in hours. These have been separated from the deduction parameters. You will need to review each allowance and hourly payment code. And so to do that from the STP2 Health Check screen, you can double click on the parameter to allow you to update the code. Next screen, thanks. And this is what you need to do here is update the reporting category and reporting subcategory as required. The allowance codes previously reported under Payroll Event 2018 will have been mapped to the equivalent 2020, and the 2018 allowance code will also be displayed. These should still be reviewed and the reporting subcategory updated as required. The reporting category is the disaggregation of gross, as explained by Christina, for reporting to the ATO. You can see in this example, the default for HOT overtime was set to gross. However, under Payroll Event 2020, the correct reporting category is now overtime's earnings. Once you've selected the new category, you select OK on the parameter, and then on the STP2 Health Check screen, mark the code as reviewed, and this will mark it as green if there are no further errors or warnings. All your payment parameters need to be set to green prior to proceeding. If you have any codes that you no longer use or you haven't used in the current financial year or last financial year, you can update the code by unticking the visible field, and this will hide the code from the STP2 Health Check screen. If you have any JobKeeper or JobMaker codes, these are ignored. The third tab on the STP2 Health Check is the Deductions tab. These are your deduction parameters, and for each deduction, they'll need to be updated with the correct ATO deduction code. Once again, from the STP2 Health Check screen, you can double click on the parameter to allow you to update the code. The deduction code field needs to be updated to reflect if the deduction is a salary sacrifice RESC or salary sacrifice not RESC, salary sacrifice for other employee benefits, workplace giving, or fees. Any after-tax deductions that are not workplace giving or fees should be set to do not report to the ATO. Once you have selected the correct deduction code, once again select OK, and then on the STP Health Check screen, select this as reviewed, which will mark it as green. And then review and proceed to update all of your other deduction codes. Once again, if there are codes that you no longer use or you haven't used the last financial year or this financial year, you can untick the visible field on the parameter. If you are unsure as to what codes should be applied to both your payments and deduction parameters, we have provided some examples at Appendix B and C in the user guide. Once all of the 3 tabs for employees, payments, and deductions have been reviewed and all items are green, you can then continue with your transition to STP Phase 2 Payroll Event 2020. So when you're ready to proceed, ensure that any pays have been processed and have been audited for the week, fortnight, or month, depending on your pay cycle. Run an end of day and then check that the System Control Report Payroll tab to ensure any employee figures balance to the earnings figures. Also ensure there are no payroll messages on the Messages tab. If these figures are not balanced, you may have a pay run that is still being processed. Once everything is in order, you can then proceed to printing your reports. It is recommended that you generate these reports and export them to Excel. These are all listed in the user guide. And we have also set at step 4 what reports we've outlined to balance against. These reports will need to be generated for all of your companies where you process payroll. The STP reconciliation will show as an STP Service Payroll Event 2018, where the different columns will allow you to balance to the other reports. At this stage, when reviewing the STP reconciliation report, you need to ensure there are no validation warnings. These will need to be resolved before continuing. Once all validation warnings have been resolved, the next step 6 of the user guide is running the STP reconciliation report as a pay event 2020. This is done by changing the STP service on the STP reconciliation report from the drop-down menu from Payroll Event 2018 to Payroll Event 2020. This is not switching over the service over to Payroll Event 2020. This is allowing you to check there are no validation errors while reporting as a Payroll Event 2020. So you need to obviously check that there are no validation errors while in Payroll Event 2020 prior to continuing and resolve them. You also see the changes in the column headings when reporting as Payroll Event 2020, showing the categories for your disaggregation of gross for paid leave, salary sacrifice, overtime, and bonuses. Once everything is in order, we change the STP service back from Payroll Event 2020 to Payroll Event 2018. Step 7 of the user guide is to submit an update event for year-to-date figures as an STP Service Payroll Event 2018. This is done from the STP Reconciliation Report, ensuring that you do have Payroll Event 2018 selected. Right-click, select Submit STP Update, and then all employees of the payroll company. And then you'll need to mark the declaration and submit the update event to the ATO. Repeat this step for each company where you process payroll by changing the company number in the STP reconciliation report. Once you've received a successful submission for each company, you can then switch your payroll service over. You cannot proceed to switch it over the service until you have completed steps 5 to 7 for all companies. Step 8 is to switch your payroll service from 2018 to 2020 for all companies. This is accessed from parameters, set parameters, payroll, processing options under the STP settings tab. The STP service will currently show Payroll Event 2018. From the drop-down, select the Payroll Event 2020 and hit Apply. A final validation check is completed. So if there are no error messages displayed, select OK to close the payroll processing window. And you have now switched your STP service over from Payroll Event 2018 to Payroll Event 2020. The next step is to run your reports again and conduct some more balance checks. Once again, we recommend that you generate these reports and export them to Excel, which will allow you to check that everything is balanced prior to proceeding. At step 10 of the user guide, we've outlined which reports to balance against. These reports will need to be generated for all companies where you process your payroll. And there is a new report called the Earnings Details by Company report. So if you don't have access again to that under the reporting menu, just contact your system administrator to give you access. So the Earnings Details report by company, we've given you a guide or a recommendation at step 9 on how to group the different columns in this report, which is by your ATO, by your company, your ATO reporting code, and ATO reporting subcode, which will allow you to balance this easily against the STP reconciliation report. Just an extra bonus with this report, as it is based on date range, you can use this report to prepare your payroll tax calculations, where, for example, you may want to group it by type for your payments and deductions, and then your payroll description as well. As previously mentioned, the STP reconciliation now shows the different columns for the different categories of your disaggregation of gross for your paid leave, salary, sacrifice, overtime, and bonuses. The allocation of these amounts is where you have updated your payroll payment codes and your payroll deduction codes, which will assist you with balancing back to that Earnings Details by Company report. One thing to note, though, is if you have processed an ETP payment during the year, the tax amount is not included in the PAYGW field, however, is shown in the ETP details for that employee, which you can see in the bottom slide of screenshot of this slide. This will show when you also export the contents of the STP rec report. Thanks, Christina. So the last step, step 11 of the user guide, is to submit an update event as STP Payroll Event 2020. So this is done from your STP reconciliation report by right-clicking, submitting your STP update and all employees of your company, and then make your declaration and submit the update event to the ATO. Repeat this for each company where you have processed your, where you process payroll by changing the company number in the STP reconciliation report. Once you have received a successful submission, you've now transitioned to Payroll Event 2020, where you can commence processing your pays. So as Christina mentioned earlier, the user guide and release notes are available from our help menu in Lawmaster. We recommend that you read the release notes, as there are other minimal changes within payroll, and you may also need to refer to the Cuba release notes as well. The steps we've gone through are from the user guide, which has more detail in it. There are other available resources on our knowledge base for you as well from the payroll menu, which has some helpful links from the ATO, which will help you, to determine what's paid leave or things like that. So we hope that's clarified some of the queries for you and what is involved in switching over from STP Phase 1 to STP Phase 2. I'll just hand over to David now.
Yep, no worries. Thanks, Leanne. So really where to from here, we're currently in the process of working through scheduling all of the relevant upgrades to Cuba R2. So our SysOps team will be in touch with you directly if you've already got a request in place, and that's over to scheduling. For those clients who are not already in the upgrade pipeline, we'll be reaching out to you directly ASAP to get those upgrades scheduled in for you as well. We also strongly recommend that if you haven't done so already, if you can complete the survey that you would have received in the release notification email, even if you don't want assistance in transitioning across to the STP side of things, that'll just give us a little bit more information about what you do, how often you do it, and so forth, and just, yeah, really builds up a little bit of knowledge around that area. And of course, if you do want assistance, then we can start scheduling out those discussions to help you get across the line there. So that really concludes our webinar for today. Thank you all so much for coming along. I know that it's a busy time of the year for everybody. If you do have any queries, if you could direct those through to the help desk just in the first instance, and we can respond to those in due course. Otherwise, have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you.